Ethan Carter had the kind of life most people only dreamed of. A self-made millionaire by the age of 35. He was the CEO of a booming tech company, a philanthropist featured in business magazines, and a man admired for his sharp mind. An even sharper intuition. But beyond the boardrooms and glossy headlines, what mattered most to Ethan was his home, a serene, sun-drenched villa on the outskirts of the city, and the woman who made it all feel real. His wife, Isla Carter, was his opposite in all the best ways. Where Ethan was intense and driven, Isla was warm, thoughtful, and gentle. She had once worked as a teacher before deciding to focus on their family. Her smile had the power to quiet Ethan's storms, and her laughter echoed like music through their home. And now, with a baby on the way, their joy felt complete. Ethan doted on her, placing a protective hand on her belly whenever she walked near stairs or bending low to kiss her forehead when she sat on the porch swing. They had already chosen a name: Lily if it was a girl, Jacob if a boy. Evenings were filled with soft jazz, dinner by candlelight, and long talks about the future. To anyone looking in from the outside, their life was nothing short of a fairy tale, but not everyone looking in saw it that way. Vanessa Moore, Ethan's executive assistant, had been with him for 4 years. Brilliant, poised, and impeccably dressed, she was the right hand behind his business success. To Ethan, she was a trusted employee, nothing more. To Vanessa, however, Ethan was everything. She watched Isla from a distance with a quiet loathing. She kept well hidden behind her painted smile. Every compliment Ethan gave his wife felt like a dagger. Every time he laughed with Isla in the office lobby, Vanessa felt an invisible wall slam down between her and the future she believed she deserved. In her mind, Isla didn't belong in Ethan's world. She was simple, plain, replaceable. Vanessa didn't know how or when, but she believed one thing with absolute certainty: Isla's place in Ethan's life would soon be hers. And with that belief, the seeds of a twisted obsession had already begun to grow. Vanessa Moore had always been in control of her career, her appearance, her reputation. But what she couldn't control was her growing obsession with Ethan Carter. It had started subtly enough. A harmless admiration for her charismatic boss. A lingering glance at the way he smoothed back his hair during meetings, or how his eyes lit up when speaking about the future. Over the years, Vanessa convinced herself that Ethan's small acts of kindness, holding the elevator, thanking her for her work, asking about her weekend, were more than just professional courtesy. To her, they were signs. Signals that he felt something too, even if he didn't yet realize it. When Ethan announced that his wife was expecting their first child, something inside Vanessa cracked. She had smiled in front of the team, even organized the office celebration, but inside she burned with jealousy. She saw Isla not as Ethan's wife, but as an obstacle. A barrier standing between her and the life she believed was rightfully hers. The fantasy began taking shape in her mind. She and Ethan, raising his child together, running the company as a power couple. She imagined holding their baby in her arms while Ethan kissed her cheek. In this delusion, Isla was always absent, erased, forgotten. Vanessa began testing boundaries, small and calculated at first. When Isla called the office to leave a message for Ethan about her doctor's appointment, Vanessa deleted it. When Isla sent flowers to Ethan's office with a note, Vanessa intercepted them. One time, she even accidentally misplaced Isla's handbag during a charity gala. Letting her spend an hour frantically searching before it was mysteriously found near the valet stand. Each act gave her a strange sense of power, as though she were slowly unraveling Isla's perfect little world. At work, Vanessa began dressing more provocatively, wearing the perfume she once overheard Isla say Ethan liked. She leaned closer than necessary when pointing at reports, let her hand linger on his shoulder during quick conversations. When Ethan asked her to stop working late and take care of herself, she mistook it for concern rooted in deeper feelings. He's just afraid to admit it, she whispered to herself. One evening, looking at her reflection, he's loyal, but loyalty fades. I just need to be there when it does. Meanwhile, Ethan was in his own world, entirely unaware of the dangerous fantasy growing right under his nose. His thoughts were consumed with nursery plans, stroller brands, and reading every parenting book he could find. He texted Isla hourly, reminded her to take her vitamins, and lit up every time her sonogram photos popped up as his phone's wallpaper. He trusted Vanessa, saw her as competent and loyal, but nothing more. Not once did he notice the sharpness in her gaze when he mentioned Isla's name, or the forced smile she gave during baby shower planning. To him, Vanessa was a valuable part of the business. To Vanessa, he was everything, and she was done waiting. The sun was just beginning to set, casting golden hues over the skyline as Vanessa carefully applied her lipstick in the mirror. She had planned every detail, what she would wear, what she would say, and how it would end. This was no longer fantasy. It was a carefully orchestrated moment. Her moment. She picked up the phone and dialed Isla's number, her voice coated in sweet, artificial warmth. Hi, Isla. It's Vanessa. I know this is unusual, but I wanted to surprise Ethan with a little gift before the baby comes. Something special from both of us. Could you meet me at the rooftop garden at Carter Tech in about an hour? I promise it'll be worth it, Isla, though slightly suspicious, agreed. She had no reason to distrust Vanessa, and the mention of a surprise for Ethan made her smile. Despite the distance she'd sometimes felt between Vanessa and herself, she wanted to believe it was just her imagination. After all, why would Vanessa hurt her? She arrived at the rooftop just as sky turned a pale lavender. A light breeze tugged at her sundress, and she gently placed a hand on her round belly. Steadying herself, Vanessa stood by the railing, a small bouquet of white roses in her hands. You made it, Vanessa said, offering a practiced smile. What's this about? Isla asked, her tone polite but guarded. Vanessa handed her the flowers. For you, and the baby. I just thought it was time we talked. Really talked. Isla's eyes narrowed. About what? Vanessa turned, the mask slipping. About how this is all wrong. About how you don't belong in Ethan's life. There it was, the truth, bold, naked. Isla's heart began to pound. What are you talking about? You, Vanessa hissed, stepping closer. You're nothing but a shadow in his life. You don't challenge him, you don't push him to be better. I've been beside him for years, building everything you get to enjoy. That baby should have been mine. Isla took a step back, her breath catching. You're sick. Ethan loves me. He chose me. Vanessa's eyes gleamed with rage. No, he's confused, but I'm going to fix that. Panic surged through Isla as she glanced toward the rooftop door. But before she could move, Vanessa stepped forward and shoved her with sudden, brutal force. Isla screamed just once before her body tumbled over the railing. The world blurred as she fell. Her arms instinctively wrapped around her stomach. Please, let the baby live. She thought in a flash of desperation before everything went dark. The crash echoed through the courtyard below. Security guards rushed to the scene, finding Isla's unconscious body crumpled on the stone tiles. Blood pooled beneath her, and her swollen belly was eerily still. Vanessa remained on the rooftop, hands trembling, chest heaving. She forced herself to scream. Someone help. She fell. The paramedics arrived within minutes. Isla was rushed to the hospital under code red. Ethan, in the middle of a late meeting, got the call and collapsed into his chair in horror. When he arrived at the hospital, the The doctors were already in surgery. Hours passed in agonizing silence. Finally, a surgeon emerged, mask pulled down. His expression grave but steady. We were able to save the baby. A boy. He's in the NICU, but stable, he said. Ethan nearly wept with relief. And Isla? The doctor hesitated. She's alive, but in a coma. Her vitals are stable, but there's no telling when or if she'll wake up. Ethan stood there, unable to move, the weight of reality crashing down like bricks. His wife, his soulmate, was unconscious, broken. His son, born into chaos. And he hadn't seen it coming. He had trusted Vanessa in the hallway, cradling his newborn son in the quiet hours of the night. Ethan made a silent vow. He would protect this child, and one day he would make whoever did this pay. Vanessa sat on a hospital bench, her eyes red and mascara smudged, rocking back and forth with rehearsed anguish. A police officer stood nearby, jotting down her statement, unaware that every tear was as false as her story. I don't know what happened, she sobbed. We were talking, and Isla, she just lost her balance. She was acting strange, emotional. She said she felt dizzy. I tried to catch her, I swear I did. The officer nodded solemnly. You said she's been unstable lately? Vanessa sniffled. Yes, she mentioned things. Said Ethan was too busy for her. That she didn't feel ready to be a mother. She wasn't herself. I was worried, honestly. By the time Ethan arrived at the hospital, his world had already turned upside down. His wife was in a coma. His son had been delivered prematurely and placed under 24-hour care. He was too numb to think clearly, too raw to question details. Vanessa was already there when he walked into the waiting room, a styrofoam cup of coffee in her hand. Ethan, she said softly, approaching him with carefully measured empathy. I'm so sorry. I never imagined. I tried to stop her. Ethan didn't reply. His expression was blank, grief cemented across his face. He allowed Vanessa to place a gentle hand on his arm. In the days that followed, Vanessa embedded herself deeper into Ethan's life. She offered to help with everything: meals, laundry, paperwork. She picked up items for the baby, coordinated with nurses, and even set up a temporary nursery in Ethan's guest room. To outsiders, it looked like a devoted friend stepping in during a time of crisis. To Vanessa, it was her opportunity. She moved through the house like she belonged, cooking dinner and serving Ethan warm plates he barely touched. Late at night, she checked on the baby, sometimes humming lullabies softly enough for Ethan to overhear from the hallway. Her presence was constant, comforting in a way that blurred the lines of familiarity and invasion. Ethan, still grappling with the trauma, didn't protest. He thanked her politely. He let her stay. He told himself it was for the baby's sake. Isla would want someone here. Someone they both knew. But as the days turned to weeks, Ethan began noticing cracks in Vanessa's story. Little things, like how she referred to Isla in past tense, even though she was still alive. Or the way she seemed too eager to erase reminders of her, clearing out her perfume, tucking away family photos, moving Isla's slippers from beside the bed. One morning, while reviewing security footage from the rooftop for insurance purposes, Ethan noticed something strange. The clip was missing. A 3-minute window of time between Isla's arrival and her fall was mysteriously blacked out. When he asked Vanessa about it, she shrugged. Probably a glitch in the system. I wouldn't worry about it. But he did worry. And now, for the first time since the tragedy, Ethan felt something other than grief. Suspicion. He replayed Vanessa's words in his head, the way her stories sometimes contradicted themselves, the oddly timed emotional displays, the growing sense that she was enjoying her place in his home too much. And in that moment, Ethan Carter made a quiet decision. He would no longer accept what he was being told. He would uncover the truth, whatever it took. Ethan sat alone in His study, the soft whir of the baby monitor, the only sound in the dimly lit room. Outside, rain tapped steadily against the windows, but inside his mind, a storm far greater was brewing. He stared at the blank space on the security footage again. Those missing 3 minutes from the rooftop camera. He had already asked IT to retrieve any backups, but there were none. The footage had been manually erased. The timestamp, the deletion pattern, it was clean, too clean. Almost professional. And only one person had consistent access to that system. Vanessa. The doubt that had been quietly growing in the back of his mind began to take shape, sharpening into suspicion. He thought back over the past few weeks, the way Vanessa had seamlessly stepped into Isla's space, how she spoke about her in the past tense, how she never once cried in private. Determined to dig deeper, Ethan began quietly searching through the digital archives of his own life. Late at night, when Vanessa was asleep, he logged into his email history and phone logs, and then hers using the access codes he had as CEO. He found something strange. Several of Isla's text messages had been deleted from his phone records, including one from the day of the incident. A message that simply read, "Vanessa is not who you think she is. We need to talk alone." The hairs on his neck stood up. Next, he searched Isla's personal drawer, the one she always kept locked but whose key he had long forgotten. Inside, tucked between a few photo albums, was a thin hand-bound journal. He opened it with trembling fingers. The entries were recent. "I don't know how to make Ethan see it, but Vanessa has become strange. She stares at me like she hates me. I feel like I'm being watched in my own home. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but something is wrong." Ethan flipped the pages, each entry more haunting than the last. Today, she forgot to relay my message. Again, that's the 3rd time this month. Ethan thinks I'm just tired, but I'm starting to think she's trying to erase me. Ethan sat back in his chair, stunned. The truth stared him in the face like a ghost. Then came an unexpected visit. A soft knock on the door of Isla's hospital room interrupted his thoughts. One of the senior nurses, Nurse Clara, stepped in, her eyes cautious. "I need to tell you something," she said in a whisper. Right after Isla came in, before she lost consciousness, she tried to say something. Ethan's heart froze. What did she say? She could barely speak, but I heard one word, over and over. She kept trying to say, "Vanessa." That was it. The final thread. Ethan nodded slowly, anger and purpose setting into his bones, but he didn't lash out. He didn't confront Vanessa. Not yet. Instead, he turned off his emotions and slipped into the role he knew best. Strategist. He would play along, let Vanessa believe she had won. Pretend to grieve, to appreciate her help, to trust her, because the best revenge, he now realized, wouldn't be about rage. It would be about control. And Ethan Carter was about to reclaim all of it piece by piece. Ethan Carter knew one thing for certain: Vanessa Moore had underestimated him. She saw a grieving man, a broken father, a widower clinging to routine, but Ethan wasn't broken. He was calculating. And now, he was angry. From the moment he heard Isla whisper Vanessa's name, Ethan shed the cloak of numbness and slid into his element, cold, strategic precision. He had built an empire with his mind, turned obstacles into opportunity, and now he would dismantle the woman who had tried to ruin his life without her suspecting a thing. He began with a shift in tone. He smiled more around Vanessa, laughed at her jokes. He let her believe she was finally winning his affection. When she handed him coffee in the morning, he let his fingers graze hers. When she cooked dinner, he complimented her cooking. Slowly, he let her back into his emotional space. It made his skin crawl, but it worked. Vanessa lit up like a woman finally being seen. She walked with new confidence, wore more revealing dresses, and spoke about the future. in ways she hadn't dared to before. "You don't have to be alone anymore, Ethan," she told him one evening. "Maybe we were meant to end up together all along." He gave her a pause, a soft smile, and the exact answer she was hoping for. "You might be right." The next week, Ethan invited Vanessa to dinner at a luxury rooftop restaurant in the city, the same place he had proposed to Isla years earlier. Vanessa, of course, didn't know that. All she saw was a candlelit table for two and a man who was finally looking at her the way she had always dreamed. "I can't keep living in the past," Ethan said softly, taking her hand. "I want to move forward with you." Vanessa gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "You mean that?" He nodded solemnly. "I do. But only if we're honest with each other. No more secrets. Ever again." She agreed without hesitation. The next day, Ethan made his next move. He hired a private surveillance team to bug Vanessa's phone and apartment discreetly, of course. Every conversation she had, every whispered call to her friend about the night Isla fell, every moment of gloating when she thought she was alone. It was all recorded. And then came the invitation, a private dinner party at Ethan's home. Small, intimate, just a few friends and close colleagues. Vanessa, thrilled by the prospect of a public debut, wore a shimmering dress and arrived early, helping Ethan with candles and seating. She didn't notice the discreet microphones hidden beneath the dinner table, or the tiny pinhole cameras installed in the corners of the dining room. Ethan had brought in a private legal team and a retired detective to monitor the event live from the office upstairs. The plan was simple. Let Vanessa speak. Let her believe she had won. And when she finally lowered her guard, the truth would spill. Dinner began casually, wine, small talk, laughter. Ethan steered the conversation toward memories, relationships, and endings. Then, with a sip of wine and a subtle cue to the others, he said, "You know, it's funny how life can change in one moment, one push, one fall." Vanessa froze. Her smile faltered and her eyes flicked to Ethan's. "What do you mean?" she asked, feigning ignorance. He leaned closer. "I mean, sometimes things don't happen by accident. Sometimes people get exactly what they planned for." Vanessa's eyes gleamed with a mix of panic and pride. She thought he knew and admired her for it. She laughed lightly, not realizing she was walking into her own undoing. "Well, she said coyly, swirling her wine. Maybe fate just needed a little help." Upstairs, the detective hit record. Ethan nodded, his smile sharp and empty. "Exactly what I thought." The laughter from the dinner table echoed under the soft glow of golden chandeliers. Glasses clinked, music played faintly in the background, and the scent of roasted rosemary chicken filled the air. Vanessa sat next to Ethan, her hand resting gently on his forearm, eyes shining with smug satisfaction. For her, this was the victory lap. Her moment. As conversation shifted from business talk to personal stories, Ethan leaned back in his chair, swirling the last sip of wine in his glass. The guests, all carefully selected, watched him with quiet interest. He glanced around the table with a calm smile and said casually, "You know, life is full of turning points." Vanessa raised a brow, playing along. "Is this a toast to new beginnings?" "In a way," Ethan replied smoothly. "But I was thinking more about endings. How sometimes people think they've won ... just before everything comes crashing down." There was a subtle shift in the air. Vanessa's smile faltered for a split second. But then, misreading his tone again, she chuckled softly and leaned in. "You mean like Isla?" she said, her voice laced with venom masked as humor. "Poor thing never saw it coming. So desperate to keep your love, and so fragile. Honestly, I did her a favor." The words left her mouth like poison, and no one spoke. The table went silent, the air thick with tension. Ethan didn't blink. So, it wasn't an accident? Vanessa shrugged, her voice suddenly bold. She was clumsy, too emotional. Always whining about being tired. She kept accusing me of being too close to you. Maybe she should have watched her step literally. She laughed. You said it yourself, Ethan. Sometimes fate needs a little help. There it was, the confession. Arrogant, unfiltered, and cruel. Ethan stood slowly, placing his glass on the table. Thank you, he said, his tone cold and final. That's all we needed. Vanessa blinked. What? He looked up at the corners of the room. You can come in now. The doors to the dining room burst open. 2 detectives and uniformed officers stepped inside with swift precision. Gasps rippled around the table. Vanessa shot to her feet, panic flooding her face. Wait, what is this? Detective Monroe stepped forward. Vanessa Moore, you are under arrest for the attempted murder of Isla Carter. Vanessa stumbled back. No, you can't do this. Oh, but we can, Ethan said, stepping aside as the officers moved in. This entire house has been under surveillance for 2 weeks. Every word you said tonight was recorded and broadcast live. Vanessa's face twisted in rage and horror. You set me up? I trusted you, Ethan said, his voice steel. You lived in my house. You helped raise my son, all while hiding what you did to his mother. As they cuffed her, Vanessa screamed, You're nothing without me. She's never coming back. You'll regret this, Ethan. Ethan watched as she was dragged from the room, her heels scraping against the marble floor, her cries echoing down the hallway. The guests remained silent, some stunned, others trembling. Ethan let out a slow breath. The performance was over. Flashbacks filled his mind. Vanessa gloating in private while the recorder in her purse picked up every word. Ethan secretly retrieving Isla's journal and reviewing deleted security footage. Hiring retired detectives, working with cybersecurity experts to recover messages. Calling in favors from old friends and law enforcement. Replaying Isla's whispered warning again and again, Vanessa, Vanessa. This had never been about revenge in the traditional sense. It had been about truth. And justice. 3 days later, Ethan sat quietly beside Isla's hospital bed, their newborn son asleep in a carrier beside him. He held her hand gently, as he had every day since the incident. You don't have to fight anymore, he whispered. She's gone, Isla. You're safe. Come back to us. The monitors beeped steadily. Her skin was pale, her eyes closed. Ethan rested his forehead against her hand, and then so subtle he thought he imagined it, her fingers twitched. He sat up, heart pounding. Isla? Her brow furrowed. Her head turned slightly. A faint groan slipped past her lips. Ethan leapt from the chair, calling for the nurse. Isla Carter, the woman everyone had almost given up on, had begun to wake. The room was still when Isla opened her eyes. A soft light filtered through the blinds, casting gentle stripes across the hospital walls. For a moment, everything felt hazy, like waking from a long, cruel dream. She blinked, slowly, trying to focus. Machines beeped rhythmically beside her. Her throat was dry, her body sore, but she was alive, and she wasn't alone. Isla. Ethan's voice trembled with disbelief, hope surging behind his words. He stood from the chair where he'd slept most nights and rushed to her side, gently cupping her face. You're awake. You came back. Tears welled in Isla's eyes. She tried to speak, but only a whisper came out. The baby? He's perfect, Ethan said, brushing a tear from her cheek. Healthy, beautiful. He's waiting to meet his mama. Moments later, a nurse wheeled in a tiny crib. Isla reached for her son with shaking arms. When she held him for the first time, all the pain, the fear, the darkness faded. She pressed her lips to his soft head and wept, the kind of tears that cleanse the soul. For a long time, they said nothing, just held each other, a mother, a father, a child, Together again, in the days that followed, the world around them began to shift. News of Vanessa's arrest spread like wildfire. The recordings Ethan had gathered were released during the trial evidence. So damning, even Vanessa's lawyer struggled to defend her. The courtroom was packed on sentencing day. Reporters lined the hallway, cameras flashing as the judge read the verdict aloud. Vanessa Moore, you are hereby sentenced to 15 years in state prison for attempted murder and obstruction of justice. She showed no remorse, just cold silence and narrowed eyes as she was led away in handcuffs. Ethan didn't attend the trial's conclusion. He had no interest in watching her final act. Instead, he held a press conference on the hospital lawn, his infant son nestled in his arms and Isla sitting quietly beside him. I failed to see the danger inside my own walls, he admitted. But my wife's courage, even in silence, guided me. Today, we begin something new. He then announced the launch of the Isla Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting victims of domestic violence and psychological manipulation. The organization would offer safe housing, therapy, legal aid, and financial support to those who had no one else to turn to. Isla's strength saved our family, he said. Now we want to help others find theirs. In the weeks that followed, Isla began physical therapy. Recovery was slow, but she fought through it with quiet resilience. Every small victory a step, a stretch, a deep breath was a reminder of her strength. At night, Ethan would sit beside her, feeding their son and reading aloud from the journal Isla had once written, the very pages that exposed Vanessa's plan and helped uncover the truth. Isla listened in silence, each entry a painful but powerful reminder of the journey they had survived. They began to really talk, about their fears, their anger, their love. And with every conversation, the wall between them crumbled. They weren't the same people they were before, but in many ways they were stronger. Together, they were rebuilding not just their lives, but their family. One evening, as Isla rocked her son to sleep in their garden, she turned to Ethan and said softly, I thought justice would mean seeing her suffer. But it's this, right here, you, him, us, this is justice. Ethan nodded, wrapping his arms around her. And it's just the beginning. 1 year later, sunlight bathed the Carter estate in a warm, golden glow. The air smelled of jasmine and fresh linen, and laughter floated through the trees like a gentle breeze. Isla stood barefoot in the garden, wearing a simple white dress. Her hair danced in the wind as she looked across the lawn where Ethan held their son, now a bright-eyed toddler with a laugh that could melt steel. The boy's tiny hands clutched his father's collar, tugging as if asking to fly again, and Ethan, dressed in a crisp linen suit, turned toward Isla with a smile that held everything love, gratitude, and quiet awe. Their life now was not extravagant. It was simple, grounded, and rich with meaning. The trauma of the past year had not been erased, but it no longer defined them. Isla had made a full recovery, though the scars, emotional and physical, remained as subtle reminders of her strength. Was their vow renewal? Not a grand affair with hundreds of guests and flashing cameras like their first wedding. Just them, a few close friends, and the baby they almost lost. A minister stood beneath a wooden arch covered in white roses, waiting for them to walk hand in hand and speak from the heart once again. Isla whispered as they approached, "This time we choose peace." Ethan nodded, "And we choose each other again, always." They spoke no elaborate promises, only the truth. That love had carried them through darkness, and that their bond was now stronger for it. Their kiss was soft and steady, and the applause that followed was laced with tears. Hundreds of miles away, in a cold prison rec room, Vanessa Moore sat hunched over a chip table. A television mounted in the corner flickered with poor reception. A news segment was playing, in a rare and touching moment. Tech mogul Ethan Carter and his wife Isla renewed their vows today at a private ceremony. The couple, who survived an attempted murder scandal last year, say their love has only grown stronger. Vanessa's fingers curled into fists. No one in the room noticed. No one cared that she was alone, forgotten, stripped of power, beauty, and control. Her delusions had shattered, and all that remained was the empty echo of a life that had never truly belonged to her. Back at the estate, Ethan held Isla's hand as they watched their son toddle toward a butterfly in the garden. "He's going to be everything we hoped for," Isla said softly. Ethan kissed her temple. "Because he's growing up in truth. In love, that's the best revenge." Isla smiled. "Not vengeance. Not rage, just peace. Because justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it rises in silence, in grace, and in the steady beating of a heart that refused to stop loving, even when the world tried to tear it apart."